Welcome to another edition of Ask Isaiah. I'm Isaiah Rhodes, and welcome to my YouTube channel. This particular episode is going to be dedicated to a Super Bowl recap from last night and a couple of previews in regards to this week's NBA trade deadline and the All-Star game coming up in regards to who's snubbed or who is perceived to be snubbed and what we have in store for the second half of the NBA season. And I hope that everyone enjoyed an exceptional Super Bowl. In my opinion, you had two teams with distinct styles. You had one team in the Kansas City Chiefs who were led by arguably the best quarterback in the league with a high-powered offense led by Eric Bieniemy and the likes of Andy Reid, a former Philadelphia Eagles coach who I truly appreciate to the highest extent. Although he didn't win a Super Bowl with the Eagles, his time with the Eagles really rebuilt the organization and put us in contention for many years to come. And although he didn't get it done, he laid the groundwork for our future Super Bowl in 2018. So much respect to him for that. So we'll break down that. And you look at the San Francisco 49ers, who had the best defense in the NFL, led by Kyle Shanahan, who is considered by many to be an offensive genius. And for these two teams to match up the way that they did, styles make fights. I thought that for what the 49ers came into the game with, I mentioned their defense, their front four has been exceptional throughout the entire season. They barely blitz because their front four put so much pressure on opposing quarterbacks, and it allowed for their secondary to really be protected in the back. But with this particular team, the Chiefs, I mentioned Patrick Mahomes, I mentioned Andy Reid and their offensive schemes, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Sammy Watkins. I felt that the Chiefs' offense would challenge the Niners just enough to make Jimmy Garoppolo their quarterback over the last 3 years. It would challenge their quarterback to truly have to throw the ball. Coming into this particular game, the most important game of the season, the most important game in football, the Super Bowl, Jimmy Garoppolo only had to throw the ball 27 times in 2 games. In the NFC Championship game against the Green Bay Packers, he only had to throw the ball 8 times. He was 6 of 8 in completions. Now, you look at how they were able to get to this point. He was really a game manager. And to throw the ball 8 times in the NFC Championship game, to have nearly 300 yards in rushing, 220 from one player and Mostert, I felt that isn't necessarily sustainable. The running game being what it is, you could get a portion of that if everything is going well. But I feel like for the totality of the game, you can't necessarily rely on that. The Chiefs have arguably the best quarterback in the NFL, although he didn't win an MVP this year. That went to Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens unanimously. Patrick Mahomes is the most well-rounded quarterback in the game right now. At 24 years old, this is his second year starting, and he's coming off of arguably one of the best seasons ever. In his first year starting, 50 touchdowns, first team All-Pro. He won the MVP last year. This year, he didn't win an MVP. He missed a couple of games due to injury, and the Chiefs didn't necessarily live up to the lofty expectations that many expected. Nevertheless, when you put their offense against most teams, they are like the 2016, 2017 Golden State Warriors. You might have them down, but you never have them out. In every game this postseason, the Chiefs trail by double digits. And in every game this postseason, they have come back and won by double digits. And in football, you rarely get to see that at such a potent level. You might go back to the greatest show on turf days with the St. Louis Rams, led by Kurt Warner, Marshall Faulk, Isaac Bruce, who, congratulations to him, he made the Pro Football Hall of Fame this year. Isaac Bruce, Torrey Holt, Isaac Hakeem, Ricky Pearl, players like that. But in this era, you rarely get to see teams get to fill it up like the Kansas City Chiefs and to go and to come into your first game of the postseason against the Houston Texans, trailing by 24 points, to be down and then come back and win the game 51-31, to be trailing twice by double digits against the Tennessee Titans and come back and win that game in the fashion that you did. It really just emphasizes how great Patrick Mahomes is. And in the Super Bowl this year, he accounted for 3 touchdowns, threw for 2, ran for 1. He did throw 2 interceptions, so that's indicative of how great the San Francisco 49ers defense was this year, because in 4 postseason games, Patrick Mahomes has 13 touchdowns compared to 2 interceptions. His first 2 interceptions of his postseason career came in last night's game. So I felt like the Niners did just enough. They played a very good game. They executed, especially they protected Jimmy Garoppolo in the best fashion that they could early. He was very efficient. He was 18 for 23 through 3 quarters, and he really didn't necessarily have to do too much. They ran a lot of gadget plays with Deebo Samuel to really get him comfortable. He did throw an interception early in the first half, but outside of that, he did everything, within the scheme to prevent himself from making mistakes and keeping Kansas City off the field in a lot of respects. Although Kansas City did move down the field early in the first half, they weren't finishing drives to the best of their ability. They went into the half tied at 10-10, and San Francisco had the ball in the first half. So, the first possession of the second half. So, for the Niners to really generate some momentum and go up 20-10 going into the fourth quarter with that defense, you think the game is well in hand coming down the stretch. You got a great defense. You put pressure on the Chiefs, and all you have to do is finish. But like I said, with the high potent offense that the Chiefs have, and that they displayed over the last 2 years, you really can never count them out. And I felt even with Patrick Mahomes' interception in the fourth quarter, the game that was around 11 minutes in the fourth, the game seemed to be over. At that point, they have the ball up 10. You can bleed clock and potentially kick a field goal and really get the game. If not out of reach, you take the time away from Patrick Mahomes and really put the Chiefs under pressure. But the Chiefs defense responded in kind, led by Tyrann Mathieu, who is one of the best secondary players in the league. He's a safety, but just his talent level and the way he was really able to bring the best out of this defensive core, it really showed in the latter parts of this game. Terrell Suggs, all these different pieces that really helped this Kansas City Chiefs defense come into their own in the second half of the season. They were able to get a quick 3 and outs, and then you saw the best of Patrick Mahomes. He led the Chiefs down the field really quickly. Tyreek Hill came up big in the fourth quarter. He was relatively quiet for the majority of the game. Had 5 receptions through 3 quarters. Came up big in the fourth quarter with 4 receptions. He ended the game with over 100 yards receiving, 9 receptions for 105 yards. Travis Kelce came up big down the stretch in the fourth. He caught a touchdown in the fourth quarter. Then you start to see the weapons really step up. Sammy Watkins stepped up as well in the Super Bowl. So that fourth quarter, you saw Patrick Mahomes really get comfortable. I mentioned them moving down the field early, but not finishing drives. In the fourth quarter, with the game on the line, they started finishing drives. And a lot of the credit isn't going to go to Patrick Mahomes, but their running back, Damian Williams, came up huge in not only this Super Bowl, but in the playoffs. He, along with Marcus Allen and Terrell Davis, are the only running backs in NFL history to score in each of their first 6 postseason games. And for Damian Williams to play to the level that he did, he carried the ball 17 times for 105 rushing yards. And for the Chiefs, as I mentioned, a lot of their different weapons that they have is obviously predicated on passing because of Mahomes. But for the running game to step up in the fashion that they did this postseason, they're never going to get as much credit as, let's say, a Tennessee Titans with a Derrick Henry, or even, a Seattle with uh, with a Russell Wilson and a Marshawn Lynch. Marshawn more so on reputation than actual production, but this is a team that dictated the line of scrimmage, especially later on in the fourth quarter, because when the Chiefs were able to get those 3-and-outs, like I said, the San Francisco 49ers defense was gassed. They didn't have enough time to really get the proper rest and really regenerate the energy needed to stop a Kansas City team. And they really pushed, they really kept their foot on the gas and put San Francisco in a vulnerable position, to finish out these games. Patrick Mahomes, I mentioned his interceptions, but in the fourth quarter, he was ultimately as poised as possible compared to the Niners quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo, who hadn't really been tested to this level. In the fourth, he was 3 for 11. He was overthrowing players like Emmanuel Sanders, who was wide open for a potential touchdown that would have put the Niners back on top. There was just too many times where Garoppolo, when placed under pressure, really showed his level of development and where he was as a stature, as a QB, and the stature he has within the league. Nevertheless, it was an exceptional game. The Chiefs outscored the Niners 21-0 in the fourth, and Andy Reid got his first Super Bowl of his career. This is a coach who, outside of the Super Bowl win, checked all the boxes. He's top 7 in wins, top 7 in postseason wins. He had much success all the way around. And I mentioned rebuilding the Philadelphia Eagles. He also revamped the Kansas City Chiefs for an extended period of time before they actually made the step and got Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes solidified their chances of getting the Super Bowl, but even prior to that, they were perennial playoff performers. They just weren't able to get over that hump. And Mahomes and company were able to get Andy Reid over the hump for the first time in his career. So much respect to the Chiefs for that. For the Niners, their defensive core is very young. All they really need is more weapons on the outside in terms of a receiver and maybe another tight end or so outside of Kittle. And I mean, George Kittle is arguably one of the best tight ends in the league. So he's obviously solidified in that position. But you still need another weapon on side of him, a la like the Eagles have with Dallas Goedert, to complement the likes of Zach Ertz. To get another outside weapon, they have Dabo Samuels, who's really, really good, especially for a rookie. But they need another weapon on the outside, and then probably get some safeties on to protect that front four and round out that secondary. That would probably keep the Niners in contention for a long, long time. We got to see how Jimmy Garoppolo responds to this loss, to be up by double digits going into the fourth. A lot of pressure is going to be put on Kyle Shanahan and how he called the game. But when you consider the level of security that Jimmy Garoppolo has at the quarterback position, you would expect to be able to put the ball in your quarterback's hands and say, finish this game for us. We're up 10 with 7 minutes left. But unfortunately, Garoppolo at this point in his career isn't necessarily where Patrick Mahomes is in terms of responsibility and what he can actually do from a dynamic standpoint. So we'll see how next season rounds out. Best of luck to all teams. Obviously, I'm an Eagle fan, so I want my team to be in the best position possible to win going forward. But we'll see how it goes. Much respect to Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs, though. To transition to the NBA, the trade deadline is this Thursday, February 6th, 3 p.m. So there's going to be a lot of different teams that want to make the proper moves to get in championship contention or to put themselves in playoff contention. You have a lot of teams that are chasing the Los Angeles Lakers and the Milwaukee Bucks. As of right now, especially out east, you have many different teams vying for position to contend with the Bucks. You have the Boston Celtics, you have the Philadelphia 76ers, who, although they're in sixth in the East, they have the talent to compete with the Celtics. You have the Miami Heat, who are one of the biggest surprises in the league right now. They're deeply entrenched in that top four position out east. So if they could round out a particular move and put themselves not necessarily in the championship contention, but the challenge for the East, they'll be open to that as well. You have teams out west like the Houston Rockets, who are fifth. They have all the talent led by James Harden, perennial MVP candidate, and Russell Westbrook, former MVP himself. But when you have the expectations of having two MVPs, but being fifth out west, you need to figure out how to make certain moves to get in certain positions. So there's a lot of different moves out there that could be made. Um, there's a lot of talk right now about Houston. Houston is always a big um, mover and shaker during the trade deadline and the buyout market. So there's a lot of talk in regards to their starting center, Clint Capella, who's been out back and forth for some time now, dealing with a heel issue. But with his contract being a hefty contract, the Rockets not only can look for a way to move that, but try to round out and get some value, especially on the perimeter defensively, and if they can look for a big who can contribute more. As great as Capella is in terms of being a lob asset for James Harden on bailouts and in regards to rebounding at times, Clint Capella is not what his contract demands him to be. And unfortunately, when you're the Houston Rockets, you get to within one game of the NBA Finals, you tend to overpay to keep a roster. In 2018, they got within one game of the NBA Finals. Fortunately, injuries to Chris Paul really derailed that dream, and to keep that particular core together as best as possible, uh, the Rockets brass overpaid a lot of different players, including Capella, and it really threw a wrench in how they were able to rebuild going forward. So far, they like I said, they're fifth in the West, but they do need to make a move, and they're trying to use that Capella asset to create certain moves. You got players like Derrick Rose for the Pistons, who is having an exceptional year considering the standard he's at. He is a microwave type player who can come in and fill up points very quickly. At the point guard position, many teams can use a dynamic point guard to spell their starting point guard to create a quick offense, especially in key situations. He is a valuable asset that could be used, and many teams might be vying for him. There's been a lot of talk about the Lakers needing him. The Lakers, while having the best record out west, their record against top tier teams isn't the best. They dominate weaker teams and are able to exploit those teams with their talent level being Anthony Davis being their best player right now, their most recognizable and obviously the most recognizable face in the league. LeBron James in year 17 still is dynamic and can compete at a high level, but there's certain parts of his game, especially in year 17, that need help. And if he had better perimeter scorers around him, they probably would be better. They probably would be in best position to win a championship. But there's flaws on the Lakers in regards to their guard play. Danny Green is a great 3-and-D player, but at times he has to focus specifically on defense, and his 3-pointers struggle. They have Quinn Cook, who barely plays. You have Troy Daniels, who's a great sharpshooter, but you can only play him in certain situations. A.B. Bradley is a defensive presence, but his defense doesn't really live up to his reputation as compared to who he used to be. He hasn't scored on a consistent basis against top tier teams. And you have the likes of Rajon Rondo, who, while, as I said, he's lived off a great reputation for an extended period of time. He's a champion, and that experience is well suited for this group. And at times, though, his lack of scoring is exploited against elite teams. So the Lakers could utilize a dynamic point guard like Derrick Rose or just anybody out there that could help LeBron in certain situations. They also could use more defensive presence. I mentioned the defensive assets that they do have in Green and Bradley, but they're more so uh, predicated on reputation rather than what they're actually producing. So there's a lot of different moves that could be made. For me, especially with the Philadelphia 76ers, they have a game tonight on NBA TV at 7:30 against the Miami Heat. That's a huge game. Both teams were present at the Super Bowl, so all of that energy being in Miami this weekend could affect teams both positively and negatively. We'll see who is doing the most partying based on the early outset of this game. We'll see how teams are able to adjust to that experience. But for Philadelphia, I think we're in a weird space. While we do have talent and we do compete at a high level with most teams, our issue is how our team is constructed. We have Joel Embiid, one of the best bigs in the NBA, and we have Ben Simmons, a dynamic talent. Although he's very, very criticized for his offensive game, he's one of the best defenders in the NBA. He's 6'10", he's 23, and he's one of the best passers in the NBA. So not just passes, but playmakers all around. So we're stuck in between who we should build around. Wow, Embiid it would be considered a better player because of his offensive prowess. I think that his lack of durability really puts the 76ers in a conundrum because Ben Simmons plays every day, and while Embiid is present, he isn't. While his presence is extremely important, he isn't always present. So there's times where we fare much better when Embiid's out the game because we play much faster. We're able to spread the floor and allow Ben, who is really, in my opinion, a power forward. He's able to be utilized in a different way compared to when Embiid's on the floor, who you have to exploit and emphasize at a high level because he's 7 foot. He can stretch the floor. He just a more featured player. So we have to decide who we're going to build around. I think for me, at this point, obviously Embiid, because of his scoring, would be considered the player you build around. But I'm starting to turn the corner on Ben in regards to how to build around, focusing on building around him. I think in the times that Embiid has been out, especially this recent time where he broke his finger, um, the 76ers showed me a lot, especially against top tier teams. We didn't necessarily win on the road to the level that I would like, but the fashion in which we won and were able to find ways to score, even with Ben, you know, as a playmaker, he found ways to score at a higher rate without Embiid on the floor. And the 76ers have to find um, a way to make both players cohesive being on the floor together because down the stretch of playoff games, Embiid's going to be on the floor, and you're going to need Ben to still be aggressive and find ways to score as well. So the 76ers are in need to make a move as well. Um, I mentioned Miami. Miami's been able to exceed all expectations. I mean, the way that organization has found ways to remain relevant, even without the likes of LeBron James for an extended period of time, and most recently their franchise pillar, Dwayne Wade, who just retired. That goes to show you how committed they are to winning regardless of circumstance, and their eye for talent is second to none. They were able to find uh, Kendrick Nunn, who spent a lot of time in the D League, in the G League for some years. He's not only been a surprise for Miami, but he's been a surprise to the whole league. He's been able to score at a consistent basis for them. They drafted Tyler Hero, one of the best shooters in the draft out of the University of Kentucky. You have Bam Adebayo really coming into his own. You still have Gordon Dragic, who many consider to be on the trading block for some years, well, for a year and a half or so. He's been able to, salvage his career in Miami and really contribute at a high level with this particular unit. You have Duncan, who not Tim Duncan, but Duncan, who's been able to be a sharpshooter for this team, especially on catch and shoot. He's probably one of the best shooters in the league right now. This is a group that has been able to salvage many different wins, especially at home. They have one of the best home records in the NBA. Miami could use a player to complement the likes of Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler is a player who gives them validity as not I wouldn't call him a superstar, but he is an all-star in this league, and he's a consistent star in this league. He brings energy defensively, and he really set the tone from a leadership perspective to lead this young core. Now they're gonna need something else outside of Jimmy's presence to really take them to the next level. Now many are considering Miami to be a viable space for free agency, and we've seen Pat Riley pull rabbits out of his hat many different times. But there's talks that Miami doesn't want to necessarily utilize all of their cap space because they're trying to prepare for Giannis Antetokounmpo's free agency in 2021. That could be the case. So you have to consider what they want to do. Do they want to throw caution to the wind and put everything on Front Street, put everything in the middle of the table, and prepare for this young core and put players in position to, compete, and then in 2001 go for the championship? Or are you going to, make a move and try to solidify your space in the East right now? As I said, they've overachieved compared to certain expectations, but with the group that you have and the security that you have, knowing that this group is young, you probably don't want to necessarily waste too much. You want this group to get as much experience as possible, and then present this group as as well-rounded as possible to the likes of a potential free agent to come to your team, a la like Kevin Durant and Kyrie represented with the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets weren't in the running for Kevin Durant prior to the summer, but with the Nets making the run that they did and showcasing themselves with Caris LeVert, with Spencer Dinwiddie, with Joe Harris, now you're showing Kevin Durant and Kyrie that you're a viable space. So maybe that's what Miami would like to do prior to Giannis Antetokounmpo's free agency for 2021. We'll see. Other teams that might be looking to make a run or make a move in free agency could be the Orlando Magic. Orlando has been trying to, salvage this season as best they can. They've dealt with many different injuries to Jonathan Isaac, their standout wing defender, and he's running into a solid scorer as well. Jonathan Isaac's been out, and he's going to be out for an extended period of time. They've been able to still win with the likes of Aaron Gordon and Terrence Ross and Vujicic. So, but they're at the bottom of the East. Could they make a move that could, put them in the conversation for a top 5? You still have Indiana, who, while they do receive Victor Oladipo's return, that helps them. That's more so like a trade deadline move, although he's been there for a while. He hasn't been there all season. Him coming at this particular time could help them round into shape going into the playoffs. You got Malcolm Brogdon, who's dealt with some injuries. If he comes back into the fold with the likes of Victor Oladipo at the right time, Indiana could put themselves in position. It'll be real interesting to see. For me, though, you have to really, in terms of trade deadlines, you have to think about what your team needs, how to complement the team, and what are your potential goals. There's some teams that sometimes they make certain moves for the short term, but it really handicaps you in the long term. Like Miami, when they signed Hassan Whiteside, who performed exceptionally well for 2 months in 2016, they ended up extending him for $95 million, but that cash strapped them for many years to come, and they missed out on potential free agents. So you have to really, really look at the scope of your team and really, really see what's the potential for the team and what are your future goals. Like, I feel like for Oklahoma City, they're in the perfect position. They got rid of Paul George and Russell Westbrook in the offseason. Jeremy Grant went to Denver as well. I mentioned Westbrook on the Rockets. Paul George was on the Clippers. So they had to receive multiple assets back for that. They got younger with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They got Danilo Gallinari from the Clippers, but they got a number of assets to protect themselves going forward. They received Chris Paul from the Rockets, and while many people expected them to be one of the worst teams in the NBA, they're extremely competitive, and it shows you how great of a coach Billy Donovan is, considering the circumstances. They've been able to compete at a high level. They've been consistent. They're 10 games over 500 so far with 32 games to play. They're 7th in the West. So it looks as if their spot in the West is solidified so far. Now, if they were to make a move, it would only build for more success and preparing for their future. They're speaking about moving Steven Adams to Atlanta. And while Steven Adams has been a exceptional pillar for the Thunder for an extended period of time, it might be time to move on. And he's a valuable piece. He's only 26 years old, so you can use that youth to your advantage potentially. He could get you some draft picks. You can get a young player from Atlanta. They have a number of young players you could utilize. And then also there's teams that will want Danilo Gallinari for a playoff push. So I feel like a team like the Thunder is aware of where they are. They understand what they are, but they are preparing for the future in a variety of ways that protects them depending on what position they want to. That's how you want to run your franchise, especially during the trade deadline. So we'll see what teams do. The deadline is February 6th, 3 p.m., so let's see what happens. Now, in regards to the All-Star team, there are a lot of players who have come out and complained about being snubbed. And when you look at the roster and how the roster is constructed, let's break it down in this respect. The first returns that come out for the All-Star game are from the fans. The fans pick the starters, and that is totally predicated on popularity and who they want to see. For a lot of players that have name equity and name recognition, they've established themselves over a number of years, regardless of circumstance. So you look at the likes of LeBron James, a James Harden, a Giannis Antetokounmpo, even though he's not playing, Stephen Curry, you're going to see fans vote for them, not just for what they're doing right now, but for what they've always done from previous years. Then you might have fans construct the starters based on who they want to see right now. Trae Young, Luka Doncic. Those players are young, but they're new, they're vibrant, and fans want to see them. When you look at how the starters were constructed for this year, you have out west. You have LeBron James, the leading vote getter. Out west, you have LeBron, you have Luka, you have James Harden, you have Kawhi Leonard, you have Anthony Davis. Teams want to see those guys. You got James Harden, who's a perennial prolific scorer consistently. Luka Doncic has been tearing up the entire league for this year, although he's been done with some injuries recently. His start to the season and how he's really paced the Dallas Mavericks so far, being a young team, being the face of that team, is MVP caliber worthy, and he's being recognized for that. Kawhi Leonard, coming off of a Finals MVP in Toronto, leading the Clippers despite low management. One of the best players in the NBA. You can't deny that. Anthony Davis, the same could be said. One of the best players in the NBA. He's in Los Angeles with LeBron. They have the best record out west. He's going to be recognized for that. You can't deny that. The starting five out west is indicative of what's been going on. You have elite teams, elite players being recognized for that. Now, when you look out east, in terms of how the starters are constructed, you're gonna think about some things. Trae Young, leading vote getter out west. Giannis Antetokounmpo is the leading vote getter out east, but his team has the best record in the NBA. He's coming off of an MVP. There's no argument there. At point guard, though, Trae Young, one of the top vote getters out east, despite the Atlanta Hawks having one of the worst records in the NBA. He's in year 2. He's exciting. He reminds people of Stephen Curry, and you're going to respect that part of it. Fans want to see him. It has nothing to do with record. Players might have an issue with that, but fans want to see Trae. Kemba Walker, fans recognize his contribution to the Boston Celtics despite uh, Kyrie Irving leaving them in free agency. He's come in from Charlotte, been a godsend in terms of how he's been in the locker room. He's gotten the most out of the young players, including Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. We'll speak about Jason Tatum in a little bit. He's an all-star as well, more so on the reserves. But just in terms of how Kemba has performed with that group, he's being respected for that. And you got to respect the fans' vote there. At center, you have Joel Embiid. Joel hasn't necessarily had the best season. It's really a down year compared to last year, but his contribution to a playoff team that many consider to be one of the most talented teams was recognized, and he's a star. Then Pascal Siakam. Pascal being the face of the Toronto Raptors right now, coming off of an NBA championship. You lose Kawhi Leonard, someone has to step up. He, along with Freddie VanVleet, Kyle Lowry, Serge Ibaka, and those guys have competed at a high level. They've really defended their turf really well at home. And when you look at a team defending a championship, although no one considers them to be a championship contender this year, you got to respect their effort to really be a valuable contender in terms of playoffs going forward. So Pascal made it, and you got to respect that. Now, when you look at the reserves, that's where you start to get some pushback. You have the likes of Bradley Beal, who's averaging close to 29 points per game this year. He didn't make it, but he's speaking out in regards to having an issue with not being a reserve. And for me, when you look at what the standings are out east, the Wizards are one of the worst teams in the NBA. They're 17-31. Bradley Beal's been competing at a high level. They've been dealing with injuries, but to be 17-31 and to want to be considered an all-star, obviously your numbers reflect how great you are, but many people might consider those numbers empty. When you look how the reserves are put together, that's more so from coaches around the league. And coaches are going to value impact. How do you impact winning? Now, when I mentioned Trae Young earlier, I mentioned him being voted in because of the fans. Would the coaches put Bradley Beal in at All-Star? I doubt it. I don't think they would, because they probably would view winning as paramount. And right now, the Wizards have not been a viable winner so far this season. Out west, I mentioned the starters being who they were. When you look at the reserves and how that was put together, you got Brandon Ingram, Russell Westbrook, Damian Lillard, Chris Paul. For me, there wasn't really any real pushback in regards to who the reserves were, especially out west. I can't forget Nikola Jokic and Donovan Mitchell as well. The only pushback that I would see would be Brandon Ingram. Now, there's been a lot of talk about Devin Booker, who has been upset in regards to being a starter, not being an all-star this year. And when I look at the Suns, their record is 20-29. They started the year extremely well. They were in playoff. They were in the playoff conversation for the first couple of weeks, and they compete hard, especially with Kelly Oubre complimenting Devin Booker. You got the likes of Ricky Rubio, who came this offseason. All that being said, as great of a scorer as Devin Booker is, he's averaging 27 points per game. He's shooting 50%, close to 40% from three. That type of efficiency is to be respected. But the Suns' record is 29-20. The difference between Devin Booker, who's 29-20, and the New Orleans Pelicans, who are 20-30, is Brandon Ingram had the element of surprise in his argument. Brandon Ingram is in conversation for most improved player this year. He's averaging over 25 points. He really carried the New Orleans Pelicans, especially with Zion Williamson, their coveted number 1 pick, missing the first 44 games. New Orleans was extremely competitive while Ingram was carrying the team. Now they are losing, so I can't really deny, many people arguing why is he an All-Star compared to Devin Booker. But the pushback would be, look at the guards out west compared to the forwards out west. You have James Harden, you have Luka Doncic, you have Russell Westbrook, you have Donovan Mitchell, you have Chris Paul. There's no way that Devin Booker is going to make it over any of those guards. And even if you look at Chris Paul, who's a 10-time All-Star with this particular appearance, if you didn't pick Chris Paul, you probably were going to pick Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Unfortunately, there's going to be players that are left out. For me, though, I don't necessarily agree with the outcry of it, like the disbelief of it. You have to look at your situation, look where you are. There's players like Jaylen Brown who were not named the All-Star. They chose Jason Tatum. For me, Jaylen Brown should have been an All-Star compared to the likes of Kyle Lowry. Kyle Lowry, while being a great contributor to Toronto, he missed too many games for my liking for him to be considered an All-Star. And even if you wanted to go with 2 All-Stars from Toronto, you could have went with Fred VanVleet, tongue twister. With that said, though, Toronto got 2 All-Stars. Another pushback for me would have been maybe Chris Middleton. Chris Middleton's averaging 20 points per game, and that's pretty cool, but he missed a lot of games this year, and they were still able to win at a high level because of Giannis Antetokounmpo, who so far to me is the front runner of the MVP conversation. So, I mean, there's going to be pushback in regards to who got selected and things of that nature, but you have, in terms of where you are and what your team is, you got to know that certain selections are made because of fan votes and certain selections are made due to certain circumstances. If your team is losing that much, you're probably not going to be recognized like that. But if you really look at all situations, I don't think anybody was snubbed too much, except for Jaylen Brown. That's really the only argument I would have for somebody who has contributed to a team that many didn't expect to be this good. The Boston Celtics are 3rd out East, and all 3 of their premier wing players, Kemba, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown, have been key contributors to what they've been doing. So, in that respect, I think Jaylen should have made it. He's averaging 21 points per game, shooting 50%. So, I mean, that's definitely All-Star worthy, especially considering his offseason where he was fighting for a contract, and many people didn't necessarily agree with his $115 million extension. He got that, and he's living up to it. So he should be an All-Star. But you get Bam Adebayo, you get Domantas Sabonis, you get Jimmy Butler as All-Stars for Miami. I thought the East is well recognized with who deserves to be there, especially out west. You get Donovan Mitchell in there, and Utah, who's been surprising people as well. You get Chris Paul in there for his leadership and how he's been able to impact Oklahoma City. I don't think there's anybody that was really left out. There's always going to be people who disagree. If you disagree, check out after you watch this, leave some comments. Let me know what you think. In regards to the trade deadline, we'll see how it goes. Trade deadline is this Thursday, 3 p.m. So stay tuned for that. And let's see what teams make real moves to try to get into playoff contention or championship contention. And then much respect to the Kansas City Chiefs and how they were able to come back from double-digit deficits in the 4th to bring home their first Super Bowl in 50 years, their 2nd in franchise history. Much respect to my dude, Andy Reid, for finally getting over that mountaintop. I'm Isaiah Rose. This is the Ask Isaiah YouTube channel. Thanks for checking in. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, positive, negative. All constructive criticism is necessary. I appreciate you guys. Thank you.